had an experience that was really out of the ordinary for me. It was really unusual. And I want to tell you about that. About 10 years ago, I was invited to teach in a spirituality program at a major seminary. And the program had been around for a while and was pretty well known. It was suggested that because I didn't know the participants that I attend the introductory workshop that they do to get to see the participants in this program, to understand some of their questions, to get some more background in a tangible way. So I agreed to that and went and attended the initial seminar that they do for people coming into this program. The first session of the seminar began with the facilitator asking people to define what spirituality was. And it was very specific. What is spirituality? That was the question people were to brainstorm on. While there was some different language used, all of the definitions boiled down to the same concept, that spirituality is about a relationship with God through Jesus Christ as a personal Lord and Savior. I was baffled by that. That, to me, was a theological statement that's a fairly narrow theological statement. And so I decided that I'm just going to push on it a little bit. And my first attempt to push on it was to ask, what about Buddhists? Buddhists have a long tradition of meditation. Many people do Buddhist meditation, including Christians. How does that fit into this definition? Well, that caused some discussion and some heat, but the surprising conclusion of many people in the group was that Buddhists don't have spirituality, that you can only have spirituality if you have Jesus. So I thought, okay, let me think about that. And after a little bit, I thought, let me try this direction. And so I made reference to some of the writings of Meister Eckhart, who was a Rhineland Christian mystic who influenced Martin Luther a great deal, and talked about some of the things that he said. And people got really tense. This was not only just new information for them, but they didn't agree with it. And so the facilitator looked at me and said, you know, we're here to talk about Christian spirituality, not about interfaith spirituality. And I thought, wow, this really is mind-boggling. As I continue to tell you about this, be sure to subscribe to this channel and click the bell so you're notified of future videos. So, I did agree to teach a course for them. And it really came about against my better judgment, but because they were really cajoling and inviting me and talking about how their participants could benefit from my experience. Well, it was what it was. I decided that what I would teach is a course on adult developmental psychology and spirituality. I thought if I focused on psychology, because after all, I'm a psychologist, that would really limit the need to talk about theology. I was wrong. I presented really, thoughtful, reflective information about adult development, and consistently discussions got back to one point. How do you get people at midlife? How do you get people in older age? How do you get people at different age groups to commit to Jesus as their Lord and Savior? And I thought, wow, this has nothing to do with spirituality. This has to do with evangelism. And what's interesting to me is that this is a concept that's very American, that's very individualistic, that's only been around in Christianity 150 to 200 years. It doesn't represent the breadth of Christian history, theology, or spirituality. So after the second seminar that I did with this group, and I think I had 5 seminars, I was ready to throw in the towel because every which way I turned, I was just getting challenged by this evangelical theology. And so I spent the rest of the time just sort of trying to repeat the same things over and over again, hoping maybe some of it would click, but it never really did. I ended up completing the course feeling very frustrated. I never went back to that seminary. They never invited me back. And that's probably the best relationship we could have. But I think what this underscores is that while many Christians today talk about Christian spirituality, they don't know what it is. They don't know that there is a great history of spiritual wealth within Christianity that was first rooted in Jewish experience, but then continued to evolve within Christianity. And the spirituality of Christianity is not dogmatic. It is really effusive and expansive, and it really invites people to explore in categories that they may not have considered before. And there are many, many different images and various writers, because once we reached the Christian era, people began to write their experience. So there are people like John Climacus, who in the early church began to talk about spiritual growth in terms of climbing a ladder and the steps we take. On the other hand, there was Teresa of Avila, who in the middle of the Inquisitions was talking about her interior castle and the mansions that you go through, one after the other in your stages of spiritual growth. John of the Cross really wrestled with some deep and heavy dynamics of spirituality, sort of the difficult side of things, as he talked about the dark night of the soul and the dark night of the senses. The masterpiece written by the unknown author of The Cloud of Unknowing continues to inform us today because it's the root of centering prayer, which is popular among some Christians. And in The Cloud of Unknowing, he talks about this image of going into contemplation and are moving into a cloud where we know that there's a presence that we're encountering, but that we can't really perceive it. We don't really know what's there. It's an unknowing. And then, of course, there's Julian of Norwich, who wrote about her experience of the motherhood of God and understood God as a birth giver. There are all kinds of rich pieces to Christian spirituality that are very different from Christian theology. And I think I have a concern, I know that I have a concern, that Christians don't understand their spiritual history. They don't understand the depth and the broadness of the spiritual tradition within Christianity. And it's an important history. It's literature that continues to enrich people today. So I encourage you, no matter what your background is, to consider this rich literature, to explore further what Christian spirituality really is, because it's not focused on a relationship with God through Jesus. Instead, it's focused on something much broader and about our union with the divine, with growing to the fullness of that union through our spiritual practice. Subscribe to this channel, like the video, leave me some comments, and know that I appreciate the time you spend with the videos on spirituality beyond borders. Have a great day.